Hi, everybody. This is the fourth session of our four-part series, and very happy that in a few moments going to be introducing Ashley Bathgate to you. But I thought it would take out a few minutes before we start to talk to you a little bit about what I think, my take on what I think is the future of classical music generally, and it has a lot to do with the young artists who we've been featuring on this little four-part series. Um, I think back to my growing up years when it seemed to me that classical musicians all had foreign accents, that if you were an American, you probably really weren't capable of even playing classical music. The orchestras were filled with people who had come to this country and brought their skills to them and attended schools of music in Europe. And there was even a prejudice, which I was taught, that you didn't want to go to a classical music concert unless there were a lot of foreign players, because they were really the good players. How that has changed. And so what has happened in the interim is that we have established extraordinary schools of music in this country. And when I think of places like the Tanglewood Music Center and New England Conservatory and Juilliard and Curtis and on and on and on across the country, we in the last 30 or 40 years have begun to produce the top classical musicians, and we are very well served by them, and our orchestras today are filled mostly with American-born artists. And so that's a major change. In fact, it is my take that we are in a golden age of classical musicianship, that the players who are coming out of our schools of music today are comparable to any in the world. And there are a sufficient number so that there is actually many more fabulous, creative, and wonderful artists than could people all the orchestras that we have in the country. And so there has grown up a whole circuit of young artists, extraordinarily talented, who are finding their way into new music and who are who are playing on a circuit of concert halls throughout the country that hardly existed 20 and 30 and 40 years ago. I remember that the late Silverstein, Joey Silverstein, the concertmaster of the Boston Symphony, used to say that there were 700 venues now in the country for chamber music that didn't exist when he was coming out of the Curtis School of Music. So the scene has changed a lot, and that all plays into the wonderful home concerts that we do, because it's primarily the young artists who we feature, and are they ever talented? So we're very pleased with that. There are other ways in which you can judge the popularity of classical music. You no longer can just count record sales, because record sales and CD sales have fallen so far off. You can't just count the number of tickets sold in the major cities to the major concert halls, because there now are orchestras and performances going on with classical music across our country. So the scene has changed. Some of you may know that WMHT, which is the classical music station that serves this area, has 80,000 listeners per week. I'm sure that didn't exist 45 or 50 years ago. And plus they have online listeners like myself, which aren't even counted in that number. So that's a very successful station, 24 hours a day, classical music. At Tanglewood, if you look at the season, it's much longer than it used to be. The TMC young artists have filled out the calendar so that there is now music almost every day and almost every evening of the entire summer. And so things have changed, and there is a demand for classical music. It's hard to measure, but I'm very optimistic, and I'm particularly optimistic because I think the young artists are the way forward, and that's where Ashley Bathgate is going to fit right into my optimism about what's going to be happening with classical music. So to end on a really optimistic note, I think that July 4th of 2021, I'm hoping, and I think it's possible, that Tanglewood will be opening, and that will be the summer of all summers, because the feeling is going to be of resurrection. the restoration to the throne of classical music. And so we have a lot to look forward to it. And if you're inclined to be optimistic, I hope I've given you a few good reasons. Some good things are happening, not the least of which is somebody like Ashley Bathgate, who has played, I think, 3 or 4 times in our home, Ash, and comes from nearby Saratoga Springs, New York, and she attended Bard and Yale University School of Music, where she got her master's. In my view, she is literally the leading cellist in new music across the country now. And I won't say more than the fact that she just hitched up with Eighth Blackbird, which is a group that's centered in Chicago, and which I was amazed to find out has won 4 Grammys and a MacArthur Foundation, a $400,000 MacArthur Foundation award. So this is a very well-established new music ensemble, and I'm sure she'll talk a little bit about how that's going to affect her future. So let's go right to Ash. Welcome, Ashley. Wonderful to have you. Great to see you.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. Yeah, so happy to be here to talk to you, and hopefully we'll have some discussion and I'll answer all of your questions. Uh, but yeah, I guess first I'll just give you a little bit more on my background and how I wound up where I wound up artistically. I grew up in Saratoga Springs. I was a singer first, in choirs and glee club in school, and then, in 4th grade they offer you the little instrument petting zoo, and I chose the cello. Music just kind of won out over everything else. When I was in high school, I was doing sports and a lot of extracurriculars, but it was the one thing that consumed more and more of my time. And I sort of knew, even heading to college, that that was what I wanted to be. I went to Bard. I followed my cello professor, Luis Garcia Renard, there for my undergrad, and then studied with Aldo Paraso at the Yale School of Music for my graduate work. And then at the end of that time, actually, I was very much on a traditional classical track. So that was the only rep that I was playing, was what you would think a cellist would play: Dvorak Cello Concerto, Brahms, sonatas, Beethoven, Bach suites, all of that. And only a little bit of contemporary music as part of almost a force-fed diet that we all the students there, had to participate in New Music New Haven. And oddly enough, it's changing now in school curriculums, but these things were very separate. I think we always felt very separate from the composers, the student composers who were there at the school, and that's both at Bard and Yale. And so it wasn't quite integrated, and I had a more old school view of like what contemporary music was. So when I was there in 2000, I guess Yale was 2005 to 2008, Carter was still considered very much contemporary music. Milton Babbitt, even Schoenberg, and it was a lot of the more academic, what I would call like high modernist composers. And so when one of my professors, Martin Bresnik, approached me and had heard me play this serialist piece by Donald Martino, and he said, "I think you would be a great fit for this ensemble, Bang on a Can All-Stars." I had no idea who that ensemble was, no clue as to their artistic directors, David Lang, Michael Gordon, Julia Wolfe, 2 of whom are Pulitzer Prize winners at this point. Hadn't really heard Steve Reich before, or Philip Glass, or any of the minimalist composers. And so all of a sudden I felt like the ceiling was just blown off of, my roof, and all of this music was getting in that I had never heard before, never played before. So he suggested, "You should audition for this group. They're looking for a cellist. They're based in New York City." And that's what I did. I moved to New York without any plan, without much savings or a job offer or anything. And I just took this audition about 2 weeks after I had moved into a little walk-up apartment on the fifth floor in Hell's Kitchen, and serendipitously the audition for Bang on a Can was about a block and a half away around the corner. So I walked up there and I entered the room, and the whole band was waiting there for me to just sort of plug in and play with them. It wasn't what I thought an audition like that was going to be. I thought, oh, I'll be behind a screen or I'll be playing for a panel sitting at a table, but no, it was the whole band waiting for me. And I had such a blast playing that music with them. I remember walking out of the audition just thinking, wow, I just didn't know. I didn't know this kind of music could be so fun. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know that I would love playing it so much, or playing with this instrumentation. And I was very fortunate to win that job, and it afforded me, to travel all over the world, and also touring in the U.S. I've made so many records with them, worked with so many amazing artists, both from classical music, jazz, Ornette Coleman, Don Byron, indie rock, Arcade Fire, Shara Nova, used to be Shara Warden, if any of you know. She's a wonderful singer and has a band called My Brightest Diamond. Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth. So it really ran the gamut of musical influences, the people that they would collaborate with and also commission. And I think, speaking as, from a cellist perspective, it was also very exciting because I got to play with microphones and pickups for the first time, learning how to, one can really expand the color palette. I think that, cello offers a traditional sound. It's a lyrical instrument. You amplify it, you start getting into many more overtones and the partials that come from it. You start being able to play with pedals and software programs so that you can have effects and live processing on your sound. I can, multi-track record myself, which I've done quite a bit, where there's 8 Ashleys playing at the same time, and then I'm playing the solo line live over it in performance. And so from Bang in a Can and joining that world, it just really opened the gates for me artistically, and I found what I didn't know was missing, and a kind of new excitement for the music and the profession that I had chosen. And before I got into work as a soloist, I started a few chamber ensembles. I had a duo, still have a duo with pianist Lisa Moore. We commissioned 12 new pieces to add to that repertoire. I had a piano trio with Todd Reynolds and Vicky Chow. I had a very strange, low-strung quintet with composer Florent Gis, with 2 double basses, cello, guitar, and drums, which was a virtually untourable ensemble because of the 2 large double basses, of course. So we really stayed in the surrounding area. And that kind of gave me the experience and education in starting my own new music ensemble, and a lot of the various administrative things that come along with that, like fundraising to commission composers, booking your own travel, and all of those wonderful things, being your own publicist, making your own websites, all of that stuff that they don't really teach you or tell you that you need to know when you're in school. And I'm happy to see that that is evolving, but part of my mission as an artist is also to help evolve it. I believe that a curriculum these days should include, classes in business management and PR, and being your own financial director and fundraising and all of those things, because the truth is we need those tools nowadays. Everything is very DIY, do it yourself, and I think that a lot of management companies, agents, traditionally in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s, it was very much, you would go to school and you would practice, practice, practice. and then you would leave school and there would be a job waiting for you, or you would join an orchestra, you would join a string quartet, or you would get a job teaching at a university. But those jobs have become very oversaturated and extremely competitive. And I think that management companies, agents, and publicists, first of all, they charge so much money, and it's not the same as it was, where you could sign on with someone and have a kind of guaranteed 50 concerts a year. And now there are a lot of boutique labels that are smaller, where I have had the experience of management, but I feel often, a lot of times, it's just easier and more rewarding in some ways to do that work myself. And sometimes I have to do that work myself. And so I feel that that's kind of something we need to work into the curriculums in school for people who want to be music majors. It's not, it shouldn't be the mentality that we just go and practice for 6 to 8 hours a day alone in a room and that will guarantee us success, because that's not true. What you need is to network and meet other people. You need to be, we need contemporary music. I think we're finally starting to embrace that. Concert halls like Lincoln Center and Tanglewood, who I believe have been sort of resistant to certain kinds of contemporary music, are starting to come around. They're starting to see the necessity of it. But I believe there's always been a necessity for that, to be inclusive of all tastes in music and all generations and ages in your audience. So that's kind of what's brought me to today. I started a few years ago doing more solo work, because I got the courage to kind of branch out on my own, and I realized that yes, I'm just one person and I play the cello, but now I have all of these tools, and am able to work in, I typically work in Ableton Live, which is a software program, and have commissioned, I know how to commission and do all of those things and have new pieces written for me. And so I've started to do a lot of solo shows, where I'm an orchestra of Ashley's, or I'm Ashley plus crazy electronic sounds in the background, or Robert Honstein's piece Orison has this 50-second delay reverb that happens where I'm almost playing a live duet with my own produced sound through that amplification. It's really fun. I love being able to work with living composers, and I especially love that I'm a part of that creative process. I think that when I was only playing traditional repertoire, where you don't have the benefit of working with that composer, it's written down on the page, there's a million recordings of something that exists already, you can't really, it's almost like there was a way to play Brahms, right? And if I would stray off of that path, it was like a no-no, or you just felt like you almost couldn't, because you had heard it so many times. And with new music, and especially music that you commission for yourself, no one's ever heard it, no one's ever played it, and I think it's as much mine as it is the composer who wrote it. And myself, I don't consider myself a composer so much, but that's evolving a little bit, especially right now. But I've always considered myself more of a chameleon, or an actor who puts on these different masks and these different hats to interpret other people's music. And that is more fun when you have a composer who is willing to work with you on the piece. So, for instance, the record that I put out, Ash, which is a evening length work by the Sleeping Giant Composer Collective, that's 6 composers, many of whom have been to Carl's house, or they've met or have gone to Tanglewood. I think they're in each other's orbits, and I went to school with those guys. So they wrote me a suite, with electronics and extended techniques and all of those things. And it was start to finish about 5 years. So I commissioned them, they wrote the piece, we premiered it, but then I was really in the room with many of them, just taking little iPhone videos of them asking me to improvise and try things out. You know, Jacob with the double bows. Can you play with two bows, Ashley? Well, sure, why not? You know, I try not to say no to anybody who asks me to try something. And so there were a lot of just that. It was like a seed of an idea. And then from there, we went back and forth on it, and there is born a piece. And then even when that piece is written down on paper, it's being edited and changed because I'm playing things and they're saying, oh, wait, I like how you do that. Let me write that down. Or I say, well, this is not so easy for me to do. How about if we did it this way? So they take that creative input, and for me, that's lifeblood. I mean, just being able to be a part of that and to build something and grow something. And then that's even before you get into the actual recording studio. We're having toured this piece or, you know, any piece for a number of months. And then it's really your own. You go to the recording studio, you make a lasting document of it all, which is very exciting. And even after that, we were changing things in the music and in the scores, and the flow, you know, the flow of it, because it's this really open-ended process, which I find beautiful. Because I think in school, you know, you had this goal 6 months from now where you had to give one recital, and you had your recital program and you memorized it and you had all this luxury of time, you know, to learn all that stuff. But it was one performance, and all the pressure was riding on that one performance, that it had to be perfect and just so and memorized and all of this stuff. And what I love about contemporary music is that the first performance is not the last performance. It's not the best it's going to be performed. It already has this huge future in front of it, not only for myself as a player, but then for other cellists who are going to play the piece once it's published and in the world. And some of those pieces from the Suite Ash are being played now by other cellists. And I at first I thought I was going to have a hard time letting go of, you know, my feeling of possessiveness of, oh, that's my music and I play that. But now I'm actually so excited to hear other people's interpretations and to see which ones might enter the canon, you know. So it's just a really fun thing for me. I love contemporary music for that reason. I still do play a considerable amount of traditional rep. In fact, that whole Ash project was based on or inspired by the Bach suites and my desire to kind of rediscover them. And miraculously, I feel now I'm able to approach that older repertoire with a new, fresh perspective. I look at it as if it's a new piece of music. And it's just changed the way I look at playing the cello, being a musician, and performance too, because I think part of our journey as artists is that you want to get to a point where you feel confident on stage, and although a certain amount of nerves are really great to have, and I would be disappointed if I didn't have some, but you want to feel in control and get to a point where it feels natural. And I think what makes it feel natural is not worrying so much about that end-all be-all one performance that you have, but that these pieces have a life and a journey about them. And my performance career is that. It's like growing seeds, growing trees. You know, they're not seasonal flowers, they're trees that last for years and years and years. And so that's a very rewarding experience for me. So then this pandemic hits, and just to mention, so I was with Bang & Ken All Stars for about 10 years. I left the group, I get just a little over a year, it's about a year and a half ago. And I left because I wanted to start playing different kinds of music and like pursue other projects, and I felt I'd done that for a decade, let's do something different for another decade. And so was off to a pretty good start. I think it's very scary when you leave. I'm 35 right now, and I left, I guess I was 34, 33. Very scary, kind of mid-career, to not only leave the group you've been with for a decade and which has defined you, but also to move out of New York City because I was kind of done with just the city life, the noise, the pollution, the prices, and just hemorrhaging cash the entire time, not owning something, and most importantly, I just felt like I didn't have any creative space or bandwidth anymore. Everything was too distracting. I was on the road, maybe 8 months out of the year, and including in the summertime, even if I was stationed for a few weeks here and there, I was just never home, not really able to have much of a personal life, and not able to breathe and kind of have space to think of new projects and think of other things that I wanted to do or pursue any kind of, hobbies or anything like that. And so I made that decision rather abruptly to leave New York. I came back to Saratoga, where I'm from and where my family is, and I'm in the process of building a house here. And I immediately, almost immediately, I felt just like the air kind of expand. I had more space, I had more time, I was saving money. And I think a lot of artists are kind of we're in this position even before the pandemic hit, and definitely now that the pandemic is hit, it's like everyone's fleeing and moving upstate because it's just not possible, nor would in my opinion, is it a thriving music scene the way that it was a couple decades ago. I know that from an audience perspective, there's no shortage. You have lots of concerts to go to. Everywhere you turn, downtown, uptown, midtown, Brooklyn, Brooklyn especially has become like a bit of an epicenter for art. But for an actual creator, composer, performer of contemporary music, there's number one, like very little money to be made unless you actually have a job like in the New York Phil or a teaching job at Juilliard or something like that. But there's not the same fever or grassroots feeling that you're building something. It's already built, And I think I was craving also to be part of a community, and even in my travels, be part of other people's communities where I was helping grow something from the ground up, building a contemporary music scene where there isn't one. Offering this kind of music and live performance to people who it's not normal to have these kinds of concerts in their towns, or in their schools, or working with their children, like exposing them to this kind of contemporary music and what's possible. So that also has like fed me an extreme amount. So then here we are, March hits, and well, first I see we have a question actually, but should we, I want to wait to the end, but maybe not. What was your audition with music or free play? With Bang on a Can. It was written music actually, and so it was all this music I had never heard before, and I basically practiced my butt off with the recordings, and then I was able to sit in with the band quite easily because I had just practiced furiously. But there is a great deal of, and that was one of the things actually I didn't mention, that was a gift for me, was that I'd never improvised before. And with Bang on a Can and in the music I started to play, all of a sudden I had to improvise. There were composers who were, certain parts of their pieces would dictate free play, or all. We would do that, all the time, or playing Terry Riley's In C even. There's like an improvisatory element there. I started using my voice again. I had abandoned that when I was a kid. I mean, everybody sings, but I wasn't taking voice lessons. I wasn't focusing on that at all. And Bang on a Can said, well, we have all this repertoire where you've got to sing. Is that okay? I was like, sure it is. And so then that also became part of my wheelhouse again, where now I'm singing and playing more, which I love doing. And in fact, I would like that to be my next project, is actually commissioning some songs for myself, maybe even writing some songs for myself to sing. In any case, March hits, and I remember, and I have to admit that I was a little bit of a denier of this virus. I think I was subscribing to the whole fake news or that it was being blown out of proportion. Really, we weren't paying attention to it in January or February. Um, and then I think it was like March 15th or 16th. I remember I woke up and social media was just nothing but my concerts are being canceled. This presenter is pulling the plug. This venue is pulling the plug on their entire season. I think the first, my friend Jessica Tong, um, she teaches at SUNY Fredonia, and she said our semester just got moved online. I'm not teaching in person anymore for the rest of the year, which meant that all events at state schools and eventually all schools were canceled. I was supposed to be in Kansas, teaching, with Hannah Collins, teaching in Kansas University, and that fell through, got moved online. And this was in a day. If you can imagine, every freelancer like myself who does not have a teaching job or a steady flow of income, just the bottom fell out. Everything was just canceled, canceled, canceled. And then the following day, more canceled. And then the reality starts to hit like, okay, this is a real thing. We're quarantining. We have to take it seriously. We're going to do everything we can to flatten this curve. It was a lot to digest very quickly. And my first reaction was one of anger because I think it's something that we have always discussed and known about and felt was that as a freelance artist and in music especially, it's a very disorganized, the business side of it is quite disorganized and sort of what I would say loosey-goosey, contracts not well defined, people maybe no contracts at all, no guarantees, no payment up front. And I started to realize like how lax I had been about all of that stuff, kind of taking for granted my situation, and then was very angry just to see all of these presenters say, yes, I'm so sorry, we're canceling your work, we're not compensating you at all, we don't know if we'll reschedule it, so sorry, but there's nothing we can do about this. And yeah, the cry was kind of outrage because what is that profession? What does that say? What is it? And we're not unionized as freelancers. It's not the same as if you belong to the New York City Ballet or the Met. But even at the Met, we saw they decided we won't pay our soloists that we've hired for this season. And we're putting you all, we're canceling and we're not going to compensate any of the players. Of course, I think that was to facilitate unemployment. But still, like, imagine just saying to the entire Met Orchestra, yep, sorry, you're done. Like, and the New York City Ballet, I think, and most of these orchestras are now on pause until 2021. I mean, they have no season. So it's so frightening and overwhelming. And I immediately just kind of dug my feet and I said, never again will I allow myself to be so vulnerable in these kinds of positions. Like, it's important for artists like me, I think, to stand up and to say, yes, you sent me this contract, but I can't just blindly sign it anymore as if it's as you expect me to, which is the expectation. They send you a piece of paper. It usually reflects, all of the bullet points that keep them safe and benefit them. And if you try to negotiate or argue a point, it's usually met with like surprise at like, whoa, you're trying to negotiate an actual contract? Like, it's sort of ridiculous. And so I started to put my foot down and vowed from that moment forward that I was going to just make sure every contract I signed, first of all, that there would always be a contract, and second of all, that every contract I signed I would read it very carefully and make sure that it was mutually beneficial and that everything was clearly outlined and understood, and that there will be no more waiting a month after I play the gig to be paid. Like, it's going to be half up front or a certain percentage up front, or there would be a cancellation fee in effect. And I thought maybe that would be easy because because I would just be sort of saying that up front before I accepted the work. And I was surprised that the work I did get going forward, that was predominantly online, it was met with a lot of pushback, as in, like, how dare you try to make this beneficial for yourself, which I thought was funny, and I really had to stand my ground and say, no, this is what we're doing, and I can't work for you otherwise. And so it was just much harder than I thought it was going to be, to kind of put that into place. And I think it is going to be hard unless artists kind of come together, unless we embrace more of a transparency in the business side of things, and that includes payment and equality, Like, I think it's no longer acceptable that for doing the same thing, one person would be paid more based on whatever, seniority, based on gender, based on skill level, based on instrument. And so those are things that I've been thinking a lot during this whole thing. And then, of course, you accept the reality of what it is. And I kind of then tried to be very zen about the fact that all of my gigs were getting canceled now into the summer, then into the fall, and realistically, I don't have much of a season right now until 2021, and probably even like fall of 2021. So like everything changed, and everyone is in a similar position. Even people teaching at universities, they're cutting salaries, they're cutting the fat. I had a friend who got a job at a very prominent school, and right at the wire, and they sort of said, you better sign this right now because this position almost doesn't exist at the moment. So it's very scary. And I quickly rallied, and I sort of picked up my bootstraps, and I said, listen, okay, well, I've been complaining about this stuff for years, so it's time to actually do the things that I've been saying I'm going to do. And that meant, I had never owned even a camera. I didn't have a camcorder or a DSLR or anything to record myself. I only had one microphone that I used predominantly for live performance. So the first thing I did was invest in that equipment. And now I teach a whole seminar on doing the DIY home studio, setting yourself up, streaming, learning about that. It's way trickier than you would ever imagine it to be. But I got 2 external cameras. I have my capture card. You don't even need to know what that is. My light, I have lights on either side of me. And so and I'll tell you, like, my teacher was YouTube. Essentially, I just started watching all sorts of tutorials and videos on YouTube and talking with my friends back and forth, like we were just kind of banding together and teaching ourselves how to do this. Bang on a Can actually has a marathon that's streaming today, from 3 to 9, if any of you are interested, on their website. They've done 3 of these. They also kind of very quickly reacted and said, well, if we can't have our live music festival, we'll move it all online. And, this is a team of 4 people in Jody Elf's home, and they have 3 computers, and they built their own server, and they're having a streaming marathon. It's extremely difficult. I think when people they make it look easy, but all of us quickly realize that this dream of live streaming with quality, without internet hiccups and pixelation or sound dropping out, just things going wrong, it is a fantasy at this point, because we still have things like latency, of like the signal not even reaching you until 20 seconds later. And we can't make music in a Zoom room that is coordinated because your internet connection is different than my internet connection, and et cetera, et cetera. And Zoom doesn't allow for the sound to, people are starting to figure out ways to overcome that. But I think we very quickly realized that, oh, wow, this is a lot harder than we thought it would be. It's not just flipping on your device or your smartphone, pressing Facebook Live and, hi, I'm here talking. No, it's like you want a quality. I knew that I wanted a quality product. I knew I wanted good microphones, a good clear picture of my face, an ability to sync it up, which meant learning lots of software programs and downloading all sorts of plugins and, finding the little bugs in the system that were not allowing it to work. And we're all out of our depth. It's like I play the cello. I went to school to play the cello and to perform. That's been my thing now. I haven't had a, I've known my schedule in advance since I was in grade school. I mean, it's like this is a very bizarre feeling of being in school for so long. Everything's mapped out for you. Undergraduate, graduate school, I get a job right away that plans my concerts almost a year in advance. This is the first time in my life that I've had no future to think of. Like there is no plan. There are a few things here and there, but every day I wake up just sort of, wow, what do I do today? Which is frightening and also really exciting. It's both. I feel very, very of two minds during this whole thing. But my skill set was not to be a sound engineer or to be a videographer or a web a coder of a website. None of these things do I know how to do, and so we're all kind of in this boat of being babies again. But it was all stuff that was on my list. I wanted to be able to learn how to record at home. And that's one of the things, Carl touched briefly on the idea that the record industry is in shambles. I mean, it's just not, it used to be something that was lucrative for artists. You would sell CDs or you would sell records or even downloads, but now we have nothing really but streaming sites, and musicians we receive fractions of a penny. I was looking at something and it said that 150 streams of a piece is equal to one download of a song, which has been typically between $1 and $1.25. So if you can imagine, people, my check in the mail every year will be for pennies, sometimes not even $1, for thousands of streams that I've done, that I have many albums that are out there. So there's really not a way at the moment to make money, which has forced all of us to tour a lot, and now we can't even do that. So what do we do? And I think that, the answer is that we have to find ways of moving our content and performances online, which means we have to have the gear to make a quality music video, which I'm going to show you one in a few minutes. We have to have good sound, most importantly, which means you can't just use your laptop's speaker and microphone. It's just not good enough. Learning how to edit these videos, right, in iMovie or Final Cut Pro. Learning to work in digital audio workspaces, DAWs we call them, like Ableton Live, like Logic or GarageBand. Maybe some of you have heard of GarageBand. All of these things, which take hours to learn. And I think we have this time to hone those skills. And I was very fortunate during this pandemic to have many, people ask me to make content for them, for, National Sawdust. So a lot of what inspired a lot of hope in me was that after we saw a bunch of institutions and venues sort of say, we're not helping you and we're canceling our series altogether, we then saw a lot of institutions and series say, we're going to try to make this work. We're going to try to get our audiences to not refund their ticket sales and series subscriptions so the artists can be paid. We're going to move things online. We're going to start having streaming concerts and pre-recorded events, interviews with artists and composers. And so seeing that happen inspired me to keep going, and I was motivated. And so National Sawdust had the Digital Discovery Festival. I was also approached by Bobby Marr. They were doing another kind of marathon of pre-recorded works. This was earlier in March. I'm speaking to you right now. I had two music festivals which were supposed to be in person at Brandeis, and one in Averill Park in New York called Arts, Letters, and Numbers. They were both moved online. And these are festivals, by the way, that take a year of planning and a team of people to plan them. And the artistic directors of them just said, it's okay, we're going to make this work. And they've organized it in a month or 2 months in record time. And that is also in learning the technology and navigating around this, this Zoom beast, which gives us problems and headaches every day, of how we can do that. And I think I was dubious at first, and there's a part of me that is a little bit worn out of the whole Zoom room. But the encouraging thing was that I found that while the energy exchange is different, it's definitely not the same as being at a live performance. It's definitely not as good. It definitely has quality problems. But especially teaching, I've been teaching some improv classes. I've been doing webinars kind of like this where I'm talking about recording at home or giving a rhythm seminar. There is an energy still present, especially when you can see people's faces. And even though maybe the audio quality isn't the best, especially in the improv classes, I was just so heartened to see that people are still listening very carefully, and they're responding, and there is a kind of energy and magic to this online live situation. And I think we've only really scratched the surface of what that has to offer. And my feeling is that, whenever the pandemic does pass, we have a vaccine, I don't think things are going to go back to normal. And quite honestly, I hope they don't go back to normal. I do want to return to live performance, absolutely, but I've kind of vowed that I'm not going to let that rule my life anymore. I want to see how I can make a living also online, how I can teach more, how I can own my own content going forward. In other words, I will now record my albums in my house because I have that equipment, and therefore I will own my music. Not a record label will own my music, or an institution or someone else will own the rights to that. Because the thing is, like, it's many slices of a pie, and by the time it's all said and done, you have a very thin slice of that pie to call your own. And I don't want that anymore. I want to own the content, whether it's video or audio that I make, or any tutorials that I might do. And there are websites like Bandcamp where 100% goes to the artist. Patreon is a website that a lot of people are creating profiles on, which is kind of like a Kickstarter, if any of you know what that is, but it's ongoing with monthly subscriptions. So you would subscribe for $3 a month, and you would get videos of me playing, you would get pictures, or a rehearsal process, or maybe just a message from me speaking to you, things like that, where you have basically ongoing creative content that's coming in weekly or monthly, and people are subscribing, and then all of the proceeds and profits go to the artist. You own it, nobody else owns it. And so things like that I'm starting to pay more attention to, and to find the ways that I can just have more control over my music and my life and my profession. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of where I'm at. And on a more maybe spiritual or artistic side, I wanted to say a few things about that, and then I'll play you this video that I have. I think that also one of the other magical things that's happened is that when you have this space to think, I'm not running from gig to gig, I'm not jumping from train to plane to automobile, I'm in one place, I'm stationary, my mind is clear, I have a routine, I have this space to be creative. And I surprised myself that I just became interested in other things, in using cameras, in taking photos, in I'll talk about Eighth Blackbird in a minute, but we're working on a David Lang project where we're working with a very famous director named Anne Bogart, where we got in a Zoom room with her for a week, and I was getting acting lessons. We were reading through and interpreting and parsing the poetry of Gertrude Stein. I was listening to so much more music around me. I was reading books, on philosophy and Buddhism and poetry, and I was just a student again, and I became a sponge for the world around me, and especially not only the pandemic, but the Black Lives Matter movement, the state of, it's not a great time right now for our country, but I think artists are the first people to respond to that. It's part of our duty. It's our responsibility. That's what we do. We reflect what's going on in society. We reflect the times. We would hopefully create something that matters, or that heals, or that provides hope, or a perspective of something. And so I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for that to happen, just being in one place, and allowing myself to say, I'm not just a cellist. I'm not just someone who performs other people's music. I can compose, I can write, I can speak. I have a voice. I have causes that I align myself with. I've found just more of an identity, I think, during this whole time, and more reason behind the work that I'm doing, more passion, more purpose, and a feeling of freedom that I'm not just one thing. It's very easy to just fall into the career path, where I'm the bang on a can cellist, or yes, she plays this, you know what I mean, and she does only this. We should be doing many things. We can create, you don't have to limit yourself to saying, I'm just a cellist, or I'm just an instrumentalist, or I'm just a composer. I can be a visual artist. I feel like it's allowing your not labels to not be placed on us, to break those boundaries and those labels apart, and say, I'm an artist and it's my job to create. And it's open-ended how I would do that. And right now we have a tremendous sort of permission, I think, to do that, because we're ripped out of our comfort zones, and we're ripped out of the thing that we do most, which is live performance. You have this routine. Okay, I go from stage to stage, and I played these 5 programs, or I play with these 3 ensembles. No, none of that is possible right now. So it means that you have to, necessity is the mother of invention, I think. So I think that's what I have been feeling, and a lot of people I've talked to, other artists, have been feeling, that there's a bit of the walls are coming down and the boundaries are coming down. And I think from that perspective and from that place, a lot more and a lot of meaningful art can be created. So I feel, although, part of me disappointed and kind of frustrated with the situation, I also feel it's a gift, and it's a privilege to have this kind of time, and being supplemented by the government, and having institutions and people who have really risen to the occasion, Carl and Claudia included, of like helping artists like myself, pay our bills. It's like, that's the thing is, and that's a whole other hour talk maybe, is that, our lives, it's like you want to be an artist. Usually you kind of have that brain, you have that character, right? From when you're a kid, you sort of know that that's what you want to do. And it's only later that you realize that, well, but I've also got to wear the business hat, and I've got to wear the admin hat and the travel agent hat, and be a master of your time and space. Time management for a freelancer, it's crazy. Basically you're an entrepreneur, you're your own boss. It's incredibly difficult. And so those things clash. They run perpendicular, I think, and at cross purposes of like what you want to do artistically, what your dreams are, your projects, you know, your ideas, your musical voice or your artistic voice is sometimes at odds with the one that has to pay the bills. And the ones who, and when you have to raise the money yourself to commission that composer or to put on your own festival, or you know, it doesn't always work out. In some of us, you know, what you wind up doing is you keep taking job after job or gig after gig, and you're just saying yes because, and especially living in New York, it was like, well, I got to pay these bills, I got to do this, so that means I got to say yes to all of this. When as the artist side of you is just screaming, saying, slow down, take a breath, create some space. You have to be as much um, absorbing as you are outputting, you know. I think composers are a little bit better at this because they often work from home, they create from home, and they it's already a practice that you would have a certain amount of months to create a piece. You do research first, research and development, and then you start writing the piece, and then the piece is finished. For a performer like myself, it's not quite that. It's usually you get the music a few weeks before the gig, you frantically learn it, you perform it, and then you're on to the next project. It's breathless. And so I feel I'm in a place where I'm just redefining my own life and my own practice and my own definition of what kind of artist I am. And it came as a surprise that I felt that I gave myself permission, I guess, to create other things and to do other things. And I want to continue on that path. So before we get to questions, I'm going to show you about a 10-minute video of something that I made recently right here in my bedroom with my equipment. And this was for the Arts, Letters, and Numbers festival called Creative Music Online, which we worked 3 weeks with musicians, composers, architects from all over the globe in a Zoom room, and all of us, there were 4 faculty members who taught classes on various things: Indian classical music, improvisation, just intonation, all sorts of things. It was really fun and amazing. And these are people, mostly aside from the faculty, that I had never heard of or met before. And part of it was that a few of them were going to write new pieces of music for me. And so this one it's a brand new piece, and it's not even been publicly premiered. Oops. Oh, I just lost my Zoom window. That's okay. So this piece is Anush Bhutani. It's called Everything is Always Changing. And yeah, you're some of the first people to see it. So there you go. That was Everything is Always Changing by Anuj Bhutani. Hi, Carl.
Hi. That
I
was
was reading
fabulous.
people's I
You
was
had
reading people's questions while
you
I
had me mesmerized again. Oh, that was just beautiful.
Thank you.
There was a question that had to do with that, asking whether the reverb you would hear while you were making the recording, or do you add it afterwards?
So this was happening in, sometimes you would add it afterwards, but this is actually how it's designed to be played live. So Anuj wrote in a software program that's fairly common for composers to use called Max MSP. And he basically creates a map of what effects he wants, where, how much, how little, if there's delay and reverb. Mostly it's just different different wetness of reverb and some delay within that.
Mhm.
And some, you heard a little bit of like reversal of the sound when it was going zip, zip, those kinds of things. So he wrote this patch, he sends it to me. I open it up on my computer. I have a MIDI foot controller that I use to basically advance the, just but one by one. He made it pretty easy for me that there are 9 sequences, and so I just go through them chronologically, and each one has the proper setting that he wants at a certain point during the musical score. And so I'm doing that in real time. It's a little tricky. We haven't done it. That's why I didn't do it live for you today, because it's a little harder to do those things live streaming than it is to record something initially and then just present it to you this way. But it's all happening in real time, all of those effects. And in live performance, it would sound similar when you heard it on a stage. And I like working this way, because I don't write in Max MSP. I have a certain grasp of technology and like my own, I work in Ableton and things like that. But these guys are doing really complicated things that I have not done before. And so when they write these things, it's great because I ultimately I am triggering it with my own pedals, and it's part of, like I said, it's that color palette. It's expanded, and I have this whole other sound world that I can take you to. And I think this is something about Zoom and online that's sort of cool, because especially if you have headphones, I would recommend everyone, if we're hanging in for this for a while, that you do purchase some nice headphones and use them when you listen to music, because it improves the experience like tenfold than listening to it through your laptop speakers. But you really feel like you're in this world, right? Where you would it would be very different were you sitting in an audience watching this from the stage. It would be coming at you. And the interesting thing about this space we're in is that you have headphones where it's all around you. You're kind of enveloped in that sound. So I'm interested in sort of pursuing that and seeing the different things that we can do with music in that way. So that I think that covers basically what that piece entails technologically speaking.
Fabulous.
And someone else said it, it said playing contemporary music looks more physically demanding. What is your experience? How to train for the demands on your arm? Um, yes, I mean that piece not particularly, but there are other pieces where I've had to like use different bow grips, like just almost hammer clawing it to be able to get through the piece that I'm constantly just like doing oscillations for 8 minutes across the strings, or using two bows. A lot of Julia Wolf's music, is a lot of like heavy tremolo and loud, wall of sound kind of things. And so it depends on the composition and the composer you're working with. But yes, it can be extremely physically demanding, and I've had to adapt some unorthodox techniques and methods of kind of keeping my stamina and being able to get through things and saving myself injury, in my arm, because I did injure myself once, and I realized, oh, I can't keep on this way. So yes, but at this end, I think the other difficult thing is that composers are often asking you to do a lot of things you've never done before, or writing things that you just haven't seen in music. Whether it's a graphic score or a new language of signals and ways to play things, or they're asking you to invent something, or make an ugly sound or a scratchy sound. And particularly when it's more aggressive approaches to things, that can be taxing. Um, it's easy and hard, because in one way you're inventing something. I'm constantly discovering things on my instrument and techniques and sounds that are very cool, and that work. Some of them don't work, but it's like once you get the hang of it, then you have that in your wheelhouse. And at the same time, it's hard, because often the pathway to discovering it or getting it to sound just right, or being able to call on it in the moment. That's the thing, is like we do a lot of things improvising that you can't necessarily do on cue. You know what I mean? So it's like learning to cry on cue. It's the same thing, learning to pull that harmonic from the stratosphere, or to pull that one unique sound out of your instrument in the moment that you need it to happen, can be quite difficult. So there's that. But then there's also just having, when I'm playing a Brahms sonata, just phrase making, having good bow changes, having an even sound and vibrato, having just the idea and the musical essence or statement come through, whether it's, even if it's technically easy, that's hard. So everything's hard, is the answer to that.
Yeah. So a friend of ours, Janice Turan, is asking, she says that they've been fans of Eighth Blackbird for many years. And could you talk a bit about the direction of the group, that the direction will be taking, and how you see your role with Eighth Blackbird?
Sure. So yes, they approached me about this David Lang project that I was mentioning with Anne Bogart. in before the pandemic. So, but it's fairly recent. I would say like in the winter was when this discussion started. And that's a sort of a separate project where we're going to be taking the poetry of Gertrude Stein and we'll be speaking and singing it while we play as a group. But then that spilled into more discussion, and I said, well, I don't, I'm not with Bang and a Can anymore, and I want to do different things and play different kinds of music, and I've known them for years, and they've had this sudden kind of reshuffle of everything. And so they asked me if I wanted to join them for the season, and I said yes. Of course, that season right now is on pause. We don't know what's going to happen. So in some ways, they don't know what's going to happen either. We're waiting to see, but we're also taking advantage of what we have, which is online. And so I know that they're going to be doing a series of concerts, streamed probably from different locations, but also from their warehouse in Chicago. And we've gotten together like in Zoom rooms as a band and sort of discuss, well, what are we going to do in the meantime while we can't do live performance? So I think there's going to be definitely some video making in our near future. I think once it's a little bit more safe to travel and fly, I'll be going there a couple times to Chicago to work with them in their studio, in their creative space. But yeah, it's a complete overhaul and then a double overhaul just because the pandemic hit. So they're doing a lot of shuffling and reorganizing, and everybody has this big question mark hanging over what the season looks like and what will get rescheduled. We had a lot of there was a Viet Cong new piece that we were doing. There's the Kinds of Kings is a female collective of composer is writing a concerto for us, which was going to be, I think, with the Cleveland Orchestra, and Jennifer Higdon's concerto that was already written. We're going to be recording that. So there's all sorts of plans that are very exciting, but at the moment we just don't know how that's going to happen, and so it's about embracing online togetherness. And hopefully this, like, we're eager, just the six of us, to get in a room together because this band has not yet performed in this iteration. I've worked with Mayani, who's the violinist, and Lena Adnovska came to both of them were fellows at the Bang and a Can Summer Festival in years past, so I got to know them well. I knew Lisa and Matthew, who are the two original members and now artistic directors of Eighth Blackbird. I knew them for years, before, and Zach Good, who's the clarinetist, that's new. So he's new in my world. And it's all very exciting, but I think we're chomping at the bit to just get in a room together and feel what that is. And I think I'm particularly excited that, number one, it's a different kind of music than Bang in a Can. It's a different aesthetic, so that's exciting for me. I still plan to do a lot of solo stuff and other projects, but I love chamber music, so I know that I need chamber music in my diet. And so I was very excited when they asked me to join them. And also that there are, I was in a band with kind of some older dudes. It was a male heavy and much older crowd, and I'm excited that I'm in a band with 4 females, and we outnumber the males. And they're all kind of my age. And I know it sounds a little funny maybe, but for some, doing something for 10 years that's the opposite of that, I'm pretty excited that to feel what that vibe is going to be like and that energy. It's kind of very female forward, and I think a lot of us are thinking we want to commission more female composers, and be more diverse. I think all ensembles and artists and institutions right now are saying, yeah, we need to look differently and more carefully at what we program, and that we diversify, and that we are all inclusive, and that we're not going to keep going in the same ruts that we've been running in for years and years and years. So I think I'm excited about just a fresh start with them whenever that does occur.
I can't wait. So last question, Ash.
Yeah.
Louise Frankenberg says, "Wow, how can you play other than open strings with two bows?" And she identifies herself as an amateur cellist herself.
Well, it's true. Open strings are where it's at because you really can't, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't, I can't finger anything while I'm playing with two bows. So it was, but the instrument in Jacob Cooper's piece, Leyline, which I played at your house, was
We remember, and I don't think anything has ever sparked more conversation than that. All the jaws were laying on the floor after they saw that. It was amazing. It was just absolutely extraordinary. I've watched it. I
it's
think
a
you have a YouTube out with it.
I do have a
Yeah.
video. Yeah. And so yeah, they are open strings, but in that particular piece, he asks that the cellist tunes the A and D string down a whole step. So it's an A to a G and a D to a C. So then you have actually like two sets of octaves, right? You have two G's and two C's. And just it changes the resonance of the instrument. It changes the way that the overtones ring. And so the whole piece kind of builds and builds and builds. It's this like perpetuum motion wall of sound, like really aggressive. And then I add the second bow right at the end. And so I am just playing kind of oscillating across the four open strings. But there are cellists. I always mention Frances Marie Wheaty, who is, I believe, from the Netherlands, and she does play with two bows quite elegantly, I might add. And there's some videos of her two bows in one hand, where she's kind of like almost like rolling them in between her fingers and changing how they touch the string, and then she can finger while she plays. And I've seen other people, I've done this actually a few times. We experimented with, you know how you can unscrew from the frog, there's a pin that locks the hair into it to be taut. You can unscrew that and you can actually weave the hair through the strings in different combinations and then screw the pin back into the bow and play the bow with one hand as it lies, but it's almost hitting all four strings at the same time, and then you could get away with like fingering things, and that's really fun if you want to play around with that. If you have a bow that you're not too that isn't too precious to you, that you might want to, it's actually perfectly normal. It won't hurt anything to unscrew it and screw it back in, but just weave it through, and it's
Let
really
us know,
fun.
Louise, how that works out for you.
Yeah, I'll have to, maybe I'll make a video of that. I should just do like a little
Yeah.
improvisation doing something like that. It's really fun. They have bows too. There's something called a Bach bow that they sell that it basically like spreads the hair over all four strings so that you can
Mhm.
play four note chords simultaneously. There's lots of cool techniques out there for that stuff.
So, Ash, just before I let you go, I have to circle back to one of your points during your main talk. And that is
Yeah.
when I was first asked to do this series, it was proposed as a gratis situation. There would be no pay, and because most the instructors for OLLI generally are volunteers, they're not paid anything. And I said, and I refused to do this because I said that with the young artists, I would not do anything unless there was some basis on which they could be compensated for the time it would take them to prepare and to be on, which we ultimately worked out very nicely. But it's really hard because so much of what we're being fed now is coming to us at no charge online. And you can spend your whole day seeing things that are free, and it's not right. So it's really hard to charge. I mean, people say, well, why should I pay for that if I can do something for free? But I'm not going to do anything that requires a young artist to perform for us and for our friends unless there's a solid basis on which they can be paid. And so,
Well, I thank you for that, and you're a hero. But there, I mean, there's two sides. Like I have some things to say about that. I think this is one of our gray areas right now of because we as a community, we as a society, we haven't actually given the whole online music ticketed performance
yes.
a chance yet.
Mhm.
And so there's a little bit of like, it's just change. Nobody wants change. But one of the encouraging things, I think, well, first of all, for those people who do want to offer it for free, and some do, and some feel very strongly that, like, I want to just put my music online and I'm not thinking of charging money for it, and I think that's totally fine. I think it's to each his own, you know, what you feel comfortable doing. I had the opposite reaction where I just kind of tightened up and I said, no, I think now I have to be very careful about what I allow out there. Now, all of my videos on YouTube are free. It's not a monetized channel. I don't earn any revenue for that. But it's important to have a certain amount of content regardless of yourself online. That is how we consume a lot of music
Right.
and film these days, is streaming and online. And it's how you get discovered. It's like a calling card. You can say, here's what this is my project. It's just a link in an email, and that goes for presenters as much as the public, just saying, here, it's very simple. You click on this thing and you can see what the tour is, what the program is, what I've been up to, what am I about. So it's very nice to have that and to be able to throw it up there so easily. That said, I think now we have to try. We have to see if ticketed events like this, or if they're made free for the public, that there is a sponsorship or a way of still paying the participants or the audience, you know, behind the scenes. We've done that in live scenarios as well. Will subscription work? Again, but this is technology needing to catch up because it needs to be quality. And already a lot of people are like, this live stream thing, I'm not into it because the quality is bad, or the picture cuts out, or the sound cuts out. So we have to kind of get on top of those problems so that what we're offering is like the Met HD in your living room kind of thing. You know, what someone told me recently, and I jumped for joy. Cafe Lena, which is a performance venue in Saratoga. It's been around for decades and decades, since like probably the 60s. They've actually been told me they've been streaming their events for 5 years.
Mm.
And now they're charging tickets. People are paying for those tickets, and at the moment they're not too high priced. You know, it would be what a normal ticket is, between 10 and 50, depending on what it is. And the fear is that we just don't go overboard, you know, in charging like $100 maybe for the experience, because then only some people can partake. But he was also telling me that when Hamilton, you guys are probably all familiar with that Broadway show, decided to drop their video on Disney Plus streaming online, within a day they had made the revenue that they had made for the entire year on Broadway of
Oh,
live
wow.
performances.
Wow.
And when I heard that, I thought, there could be a chance for this. You know, this could be the right moment. This could be the moment where it's not that we're gonna experiment or gamble, but we have no other way of consuming it. So we kind of have to embrace it and go forward with it. So and hopefully, you know, people can just see that, like, this is a way to help keep music alive and art alive and musicians thriving throughout this. I've just seen a lot of overwhelming generosity, and it makes me feel good. It makes me want to continue doing this, knowing that you know, because there was that feeling I described of the bottom falling out, and where it felt like everyone was dumping us, and everyone was saying, "Yeah, you're the last thought. We're not going to compensate you, and and we don't even know when you're going to be able to come back and play live again. So sorry, too bad. We have our own problems to worry about." But very quickly, I think it was overwhelmingly the opposite of that, which was that people were like, "Oh, no, no, we want to keep this alive, and we want to make sure that we're helping when we can." So thank you to all of you, you know.
And I would encourage all of those who would like to follow Ash. Facebook and Instagram are a great way to see what she's up to. We follow her all the time. We try not to bother her, so we can just tune in and be on Facebook. And once in a while, we do like a lot of what she says. So we're fans. Um, Ash,
Oh,
thank you so much.
thank
And
you.
be in touch, and that was so interesting. I really loved every second of it. That was
Thank you.
great.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me, and hope I get
Yeah,
to see
when you
you.
get the live playing down, let us know.
I will. I will. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But
I
thank you
know.
all again.
Okay,
I
thanks,
appreciate
Ash.
it. All right.
Okay, bye
Bye bye.
everyone. Take care.